Atlanta just added 75,000 residents in a single year and somehow dropped from 6th to 8th largest metro in America. But here's the thing. The numbers don't tell the real story. 30 years ago, this city was dying. It lost 100,000 people over 2 decades. Today, it is on track to hit 8 million. What happened in between might be the most dramatic urban reversal in American history. The city that was supposed to disappear. Let me take you back to Atlanta in the 1980s. The city was in free fall. White flight had drained the population to the suburbs, hollowing out the urban core. Fewer than 5,000 people lived in the entire downtown area, a ghost town surrounded by a metro of millions. Crime was climbing, investment was fleeing, the tax base was collapsing. Atlanta was following the same trajectory as Detroit, Cleveland, and St. Louis. These were cities that had once been economic powerhouses, then watched helplessly as their populations evaporated and their downtowns crumbled. The pattern was depressingly familiar. Businesses relocated to suburban office parks, middle-class families followed, and the urban core was left with a shrinking tax base and growing problems. By the late 1980s, most urban planners assumed Atlanta would join the list of American cities that never recovered. The decline seemed irreversible. Downtown Atlanta after dark was a place most residents avoided entirely. The gleaming towers of Peachtree Street stood largely empty above the second floor. The city that had branded itself as too busy to hate was becoming too abandoned to matter. But then, something happened. The $5 billion gamble. In 1990, Atlanta won the bid to host the 1996 Summer Olympics. At the time, the decision raised eyebrows. Why would the International Olympic Committee choose a struggling southern city over more established candidates? The answer was ambition. Atlanta promised a transformation, not just a sporting event. The Olympics injected over $5 billion into Atlanta's economy in direct impact alone. But the money was not the point. The transformation was. City planners used the games as a catalyst to rebuild entire neighborhoods. Centennial Olympic Park, 21 acres of green space, became the largest new urban park in America in 25 years. Workers planted 10,000 trees. They installed 1,200 new streetlights. Strategic neighborhoods were bulldozed and reconstructed from the ground up. The results were dramatic. Within a decade, downtown's residential population tripled, going from under 5,000 to more than 15,000. Young professionals who had fled to the suburbs started moving back. Restaurants and shops followed them. New apartment buildings rose where parking lots had sat empty for years. The transformation was not limited to downtown. The Olympics forced Atlanta to upgrade its entire infrastructure, including roads, public transit, and telecommunications. The city built new sports venues that would serve as anchors for future development. Hotels and convention facilities expanded, positioning Atlanta as a major destination for business travel. Most importantly, the Olympics changed how the world perceived Atlanta. Before 1996, it was just another mid-sized southern city. After 1996, it was a place that had hosted the world and succeeded. That credibility mattered. It signaled to businesses, investors, and potential residents that Atlanta was a city worth betting on. The city finally had momentum. If you find stories like this interesting, consider subscribing. We break down how cities rise and fall every week, but momentum alone does not build a metropolis. The grad student who redesigned a city. The Olympics gave Atlanta credibility, but the project that is actually reshaping the city's DNA started as a graduate student's thesis. In 1999, a Georgia Tech student named Ryan Gravel proposed something audacious. He wanted to take 22 miles of abandoned freight railroad corridors that circled downtown and convert them into a connected network of parks, trails, and eventually transit. At the time, these corridors were symbols of industrial decay, rusted tracks, overgrown weeds, forgotten neighborhoods that most Atlantans drove past without a second glance. Everyone thought he was crazy. The corridors cut through some of the city's poorest areas. They were eyesores, not assets. But Gravel saw something different. He saw connectivity. He saw the potential to stitch together 45 neighborhoods that had been isolated from each other for generations. By 2005, the city had committed $4.8 billion to make it happen. They called it the BeltLine. Today, the BeltLine has become one of the most successful urban renewal projects in American history. It connects neighborhoods that had never been connected before. It has created 1,300 acres of new green space. And here is the number that matters most. The population within a half mile of the BeltLine has increased by 25%, outpacing even the metro area's aggressive 20% growth rate. Cities around the world now study the BeltLine as a model for how to revitalize urban cores without tearing them down. Atlanta finally had the infrastructure to attract new residents. But who would actually come? The reverse Great Migration. This is where Atlanta's story diverges from every other Sunbelt boom city. For most of the 20th century, the Great Migration defined American demographics. Between 1910 and 1970, roughly 6 million Black Americans left the rural South for cities in the North, the Midwest, and the West. They were escaping Jim Crow laws, seeking economic opportunity, and building new communities in places like Chicago, Detroit, and New York. But starting as a trickle in the 1970s and accelerating through the 1990s, something unprecedented happened. Younger, college-educated Black Americans began moving back to the South, and Atlanta became the dominant magnet for this reverse migration. The numbers are staggering. From 1970 to 2020, Metro Atlanta's Black population increased fivefold. By 2010, Atlanta had surpassed Chicago to become America's second largest Black population center, behind only New York. The Great Migration, which had emptied the South of Black talent for generations, was reversing, and Atlanta was capturing the lion's share. This wasn't just demographic change. It transformed Atlanta into what scholars call Black Mecca, a beacon for Black entrepreneurship, culture, and political power. The city that once served as the imperial city of the Ku Klux Klan became the capital of Black economic opportunity in America. Hip-hop labels, film studios, and Black-owned businesses established headquarters here. Political leaders emerged from Atlanta's historically Black colleges and universities. No other American city experienced anything like this. Phoenix, Dallas, and Houston were growing fast, but their growth came primarily from domestic migration and immigration patterns that looked similar to each other. Atlanta's growth had a completely different character, and it gave the city a cultural identity that set it apart from every other Sunbelt competitor. Why Atlanta? Several factors converged. The city had a strong network of historically Black colleges and universities, including Morehouse, Spelman, and Clark Atlanta, that had been producing Black professionals for over a century. It had an established Black middle class with roots going back generations. And critically, it offered something the northern cities could not: affordable housing, growing industries, and a climate where Black professionals could build wealth rather than just survive. The cultural impact rippled outward. Atlanta became the undisputed capital of Southern hip-hop, with artists and labels that shaped the sound of American music for decades. Tyler Perry built a massive film studio on 330 acres that had once been a Confederate Army base, a symbolic transformation that captured the city's evolution. Black-owned businesses found a market large enough to support their growth. Atlanta now had people, but a growing city needs jobs to keep them. Silicon Valley of the South. Population growth is one thing, but the real question is whether a city can create the economic gravity to sustain it. For decades, Atlanta's economy relied on traditional industries, logistics, retail, healthcare, and finance. These sectors provided stable employment, but they were not the kind of high-growth engines that attract ambitious young workers from around the country. That started to change around 2015. Companies like MailChimp, Calendly, and Cabbage proved that billion-dollar tech successes could happen outside Silicon Valley. The cost advantage was magnetic. An engineer in Atlanta could earn a competitive salary while paying a fraction of what they would spend on housing in San Francisco or New York. The math was simple. An AI engineer in Atlanta takes home 57% more than their counterpart in Seoul after accounting for taxes and cost of living. Compared to the Bay Area, the gap was even wider. Tech companies noticed. Microsoft, Apple, Visa, Capital One, and Walmart all established innovation centers in Metro Atlanta. MailChimp built a 360,000 square foot innovation campus right on the BeltLine, cementing the connection between the city's physical transformation and its economic evolution. Google expanded its presence. startups multiplied and converted warehouse spaces that had sat empty for decades. Today, Atlanta houses over 13,000 tech companies. Tech employment has grown 15% in just 5 years. The city produces more computer science graduates than almost any metro in the country, thanks to Georgia Tech's engineering programs and the broader university ecosystem. That talent pipeline matters. Companies know they can hire locally rather than relocating workers from expensive coastal markets. The city earned a new nickname, Silicon Valley of the South. Whether that comparison holds up long-term remains to be seen, but the direction is clear. Atlanta is no longer just a logistics and healthcare hub. It is becoming a genuine technology center with the startup culture and venture capital infrastructure to sustain growth. But there is another factor that makes Atlanta different from other tech hubs, and it is something most people overlook. No city becomes a megacity without connectivity, and Atlanta has the most powerful transportation asset in the country. Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport has been the world's busiest airport for 26 of the last 27 years. More than 100 million passengers pass through it annually. It serves over 150 domestic destinations and 70 international destinations. You can get a direct flight from Atlanta to almost anywhere. The economic impact is enormous, between $66 and $70 billion per year for the state of Georgia. The airport directly employs over 63,000 people on site, making it one of the largest employment centers in the Southeast. But the airport is not just an economic engine, it is a strategic moat. Unlike sprawling competitors where economic activity spreads evenly across dozens of suburban nodes, Atlanta maintains a strong core identity tied to global connectivity. Companies do not just relocate to Atlanta for the lower costs. They use Atlanta as their hub to reach everywhere else. When a logistics company needs to distribute products across the eastern seaboard, they route through Atlanta. When a consulting firm needs to fly partners to client sites across the country, they base operations in Atlanta. This connectivity compounds over time. The more companies that locate near the airport, the more flight routes become economically viable. The more routes that exist, the more attractive Atlanta becomes for the next company considering a move. It is a flywheel that has been spinning for decades, and it shows no signs of slowing down. So Atlanta has tech jobs, population growth, cultural identity, and unmatched connectivity. Everything I have told you so far sounds like a success story, and in many ways it is, but there is a tension building beneath the surface. The BeltLine, Atlanta's crown jewel, is also creating a crisis. When Ryan Gravel first proposed the project, he didn't just envision parks and trails, he envisioned equity. The original BeltLine mandate included affordable housing protections. The goal was to connect communities, not displace them. Many of the neighborhoods along the corridor were predominantly black, working-class areas that had been neglected for decades. The BeltLine was supposed to bring investment without pushing out the people who lived there. That's not what happened. Property values in neighborhoods adjacent to the BeltLine have surged more than 25%. Longtime residents face property tax increases that price them out of homes their families have owned for generations. Rental prices have climbed even faster. The very communities the BeltLine was built to uplift are being pushed to the margins of the metro area. Scholars call this green gentrification, when infrastructure investment designed to help existing residents instead accelerates their displacement. It has happened in every American city that has attempted large-scale urban renewal. New York's High Line transformed the meatpacking district but displaced thousands of lower-income residents. Chicago's 606 Trail saw property values spike 48% in adjacent neighborhoods within 5 years. The pattern repeats everywhere. Build something beautiful, watch property values surge, watch longtime residents leave. No American city has successfully scaled a project like the BeltLine without this happening. Atlanta is trying to be the first. The city has created affordable housing trust funds, implemented inclusionary zoning requirements, and launched community land trusts designed to preserve long-term affordability. Community groups are pushing for stronger protections. Developers are being required to set aside units at below-market rates. Whether these measures will work or whether they are too little too late remains an open question. Some neighborhoods along the BeltLine have already transformed beyond recognition. Others are still in the early stages of change. with longtime residents watching anxiously as coffee shops and boutiques replace the businesses they have known for decades. The stakes are high. If Atlanta can figure out how to grow without displacing the communities that give it character, it becomes a model for cities around the world. If it can't, it becomes another cautionary tale of a city that built beautiful infrastructure while pushing its most vulnerable residents to the periphery. The paradox resolved. So let's return to where we started. Why did Atlanta drop from 6th to 8th largest metro despite adding 75,000 people in a single year? The answer is simple. Miami, Washington, D.C., and other Sunbelt cities are growing even faster. Atlanta isn't slowing down. It's in a race where everyone is sprinting. The city proper added 80,000 residents between 2010 and 2023, a 19% increase. The metro area hit 5.3 million in 2025. Current projections show it reaching 8 million or more by 2040. But the ranking matters less than the trajectory. Atlanta isn't competing to be the biggest metro in America. It's building something different, a city that reversed its own death spiral, attracted a historic demographic shift, and is now trying to figure out how to grow without losing the communities that make it worth growing. The question isn't whether Atlanta will become a mega city. That's already happening. The question is what kind of mega city it will become. Will the BeltLine model prove that infrastructure can lift communities rather than displace them? Will the tech boom sustain through the next economic cycle or contract when industry trends shift? Will the reverse Great Migration continue, or will rising costs push the next generation of Black professionals elsewhere? Atlanta transformed from a hollowed-out southern city into a legitimate contender for America's next great metroplex. But the story isn't finished. The choices made in the next decade will determine whether Atlanta becomes a model for inclusive growth or another example of a city that grew too fast for its own good.